At my daughter's birthday, my father gave her a dollar store comb and said, "Pretty things aren't for kids like you." My kids started crying. My sister burst out laughing. 30 minutes later, no one was laughing when I pulled the envelope from my bag. And I don't think I've ever hated my father more than I did that day. And the worst part? My mother just stood there beside him like she always does, like his shadow, nodding silently while he tears people down. I used to think maybe she was scared of him, but after everything, I think she just enjoys watching. I think they both feed off cruelty. His, the loud, obvious kind, and hers, the quiet, smirking kind that lets you know she's never going to be on your side. It was my daughter Lily's 7th birthday. She'd been counting down for weeks, drawing pictures of her dream cake, writing little invitations for her classmates, even asking if Grandpa and Grandma would come. I told her yes. I didn't want to, but I said yes anyway. I guess I still had this tiny voice in the back of my head whispering maybe they'd surprise me. Maybe they'd act like the grandparents she deserved. They didn't. The party was at one of those indoor play places. Bright foam mats, jungle gyms, music playing over the speakers. I'd spent more than I should have, but Lily was glowing, running around in her sparkly birthday dress, squealing with her friends. For a minute, everything felt good. Then my parents walked in. My dad was holding a wrinkled plastic bag from the dollar store. My mom had that same tight smile she always wears in public. No gift wrap, no card, no effort, just the two of them looking around like they were the ones being celebrated. Lily ran up to them, bouncing on her toes. He handed her the bag without even kneeling down. She reached in and pulled out a broken pink comb, the kind that's already cracked before you even leave the store. It still had a clearance sticker on it, and dust. There was a weird pause. Then he said, loud enough for everyone to hear, "Pretty things aren't for kids like you." I swear time stopped. Lily stared at the comb. She looked up at him, then over at me. Her lip was trembling. Jenna, my sister, burst out laughing. Her twins joined in, loud and obnoxious. My mother didn't say a word. She just stood there watching, like this was the most natural thing in the world. I didn't scream. I didn't throw the comb. I didn't grab my father by the collar like I wanted to. I just knelt down next to Lily and told her to come with me. We went to the bathroom. She cried. Not loud, just the kind of crying that makes your heart sink. Quiet, embarrassed, confused. I wiped her face and told her the truth. Some people don't know how to be kind, and it's not her fault. She nodded, brave as ever. She asked if she could still have cake. I told her she could have 2 slices. Back in the party room, things had moved on like nothing happened. My dad was holding court at one of the tables, telling some stupid story. Jenna was gossiping with 2 other moms. My mom was already sitting with a plate of pizza, acting like she'd had a hard day, but I was done pretending. I waited until after the cake. I didn't want to take that from Lily. She'd gotten a beautiful custom unicorn cake, exactly the one she'd drawn. She smiled again when we sang. That gave me the push I needed. When the candles were out and people were settling into that after-cake lull, I stood up. I pulled the envelope from my bag, walked right over to my father, and handed it to him. He squinted at it, confused. I told him to open it. Inside was a document he hadn't seen in years, the one I'd been waiting to use. The deed to the house he and my mother lived in. The house they called theirs. The one they'd always threatened to pass down to Jenna, only it wasn't theirs. It was mine. I hadn't kicked them out before because I was still renting, paying someone else's mortgage while they lived for free in the house I legally owned. But I'd reached my limit. I wanted a home for Lily, a real one, and now I had it. He looked up at me, then down at the papers. His face turned red. My mother grabbed the envelope and started reading. Jenna stopped laughing. That was the moment everything shifted, and I wasn't even close to done. My dad didn't react the way I expected. He didn't explode or shout. He just froze like he'd forgotten how to read. His fingers flipped through the pages slowly, lips moving like he was trying to sound out words, like legal English was suddenly too complicated for the man who'd spent decades lecturing everyone about being the head of the family. My mom snatched the envelope from him when she realized something wasn't right. Her eyes darted back and forth across the first page, then the second. Then she stopped and stared at my signature on the last one. She looked up at me, and for the first time in a very long time, she looked genuinely scared. Jenna stood up slowly behind them. She wasn't laughing anymore. She leaned over and tried to look at the papers, too, but my mom pulled them closer, shielding them like a secret. Someone at the party whispered, "What's going on?" I ignored it. I said it plainly so there'd be no confusion. "The house you live in is mine. Wiggly has been since Grandma passed. He left it to me, not you. I let you stay there because I was trying to be respectful. That's over." My dad blinked, still didn't say anything. I told him I'd been paying the property taxes for 8 years. Maintenance, difference, the city fines they ignored. For letting the porch rot, I covered it all quietly, patiently, because for some stupid reason I thought one day they might appreciate it, or at least act like parents. Then I said the rest. "You have 30 days to vacate. I'm moving in." That's when the yelling started. Jenna exploded first, calling me insane, ungrateful, a narcissist. She said I was destroying the family, that I was doing this out of jealousy. She said my daughter, my sweet Lily, was just an excuse for revenge. She stormed out with her twins, dragging them by their wrists. They didn't even get to take their goodie bags. One of them started crying because he dropped a cupcake on the floor, and Jenna just kept walking. My mom muttered something under her breath and followed, still clutching the envelope like it might rewrite itself on the way to the car. My dad stayed for a few seconds longer. He didn't look at me, just stared in the direction Jenna had gone. Then he said, "You'll regret this," and left. He didn't say goodbye to Lily. Once the door shut behind them, it felt like the whole room exhaled. People who'd been frozen with secondhand discomfort started moving again. The music came back on. Some of the kids started climbing into the ball pit. Andrea came over to me with a half-eaten slice of cake and said, "You should have done that years ago." She wasn't wrong. I sat down next to Lily and asked how she was feeling. She shrugged and said she was fine, but then added that next time she didn't want Grandpa to come to her party. I told her he wouldn't be coming to anything ever again. Then she smiled and asked if she could take an extra balloon home. I told her she could take 3. That night, when she was asleep, I sat on my couch and opened the envelope again. I read through the papers for the 100th time, not because I doubted them, but because I wanted to feel that power again, that control. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about protecting Lily from the same people who made me feel worthless for most of my life. I sent an email to my lawyer just before midnight. The eviction notice would go out in the morning. I didn't expect them to go quietly, and I didn't care. The eviction notice hit their doorstep on a Wednesday morning. By noon, my phone was already blowing up. First, a missed call from my mom, then another. Then Jenna sent a photo of the envelope sitting open on their kitchen table, followed by a one-line text. Seriously, no punctuation, no explanation, just that. I ignored it. At 4:11 p.m., Jenna tried again with a voice message. I didn't play it. Whatever she had to say, I'd already heard it 1,000 times before. I was dramatic, selfish, emotional, unstable, jealous of her perfect family. They always defaulted to that, like my childhood had been some fever dream I'd made up to embarrass them. I took Lily out for frozen yogurt. We sat in the car while she told me about a boy in her class who says "ugh" every time someone mentions vegetables. She was laughing, completely untouched by the storm building just a few miles away. And I realized then how much I'd done right. I kept her soft. She didn't flinch when people raised their voices. She wasn't scared of making a mess. She was nothing like I was at her age, and I wasn't about to let them get near her again. The next morning, they showed up at my apartment. I hadn't even had coffee yet. Lily was still in bed when the banging started. Not a knock, not a ring of the bell. Fists pounding the door fast and hard. I looked through the peephole. My dad, my mom, Jenna. I stepped outside and shut the door behind me before they could see Lily. The second I opened it, my dad launched in. Said the deed was a lie, that Grandma must have been confused, and that the whole thing wouldn't hold up in court. He kept going, calling me heartless, selfish, unnatural. Said no daughter evicts her own parents. My mom cut in, waving a manila folder like it was Exhibit A. She said they'd sacrificed so much for me. She brought up a winter coat they bought me in 8th grade, some orthodontist bill, a birthday cake when I was 12. Like those things bought them lifetime rights to everything I owned. Jenna stood off to the side, sipping her iced coffee, like this was just another episode in the family circus. She didn't say much until I looked at her and said, "And you? You laughed at my daughter." That's when she finally blinked. She said I was overreacting, that it was just a joke, that Lily wouldn't even remember. I told her I'd make damn sure she didn't have to. And then, just when I thought they might run out of steam, my dad dropped it. He said, straight-faced, like he was stating a fact, "You've always been bitter because we love Jenna more." My mom didn't flinch. Jenna didn't correct him. They didn't even see it as a cruel thing to say. It was just the truth they'd lived in for so long, they forgot to be ashamed of it. I nodded, said they had 28 days to leave. Then I turned around, walked inside, and locked the door behind me. Lily had woken up. She asked if everything was okay. I told her, yeah, just some people who won't be around much longer. After breakfast, I drove over to the house. I still called it that. The house, not my house. Not yet. I think part of me still associated it with pain. With being 16 and told I couldn't eat dinner until my room was spotless. With being 18 and hearing my dad tell me I'd never make it without their help. With my mom whispering to relatives that Jenna had turned out better. But standing there that morning, alone in the driveway, I saw it differently. This was the place where my daughter was going to learn to ride a bike, where we'd paint the walls any color we wanted, where nobody would say she wasn't pretty enough, smart enough, or good enough. I went inside with a box of packing tape and started emptying their things. The hideous floral couch, gone. The dusty ceramic figurines my mom lined up on the mantel, gone. My dad's recliner, the one he sat in while he made me feel small, out on the curb by noon. I hired movers to take everything else to a storage unit. I didn't throw anything away. I wanted to, but I wanted this done clean. My lawyer warned me there'd be resistance, that they might try to contest the will, but the documents were airtight, witnesses notarized. Grandma left no room for interpretation. She knew what they were like, and she chose me. They just never thought I'd use it. But I wasn't that scared, obedient girl anymore. I was a mother now, and I was going to finish what I started. For a while I was quiet, too quiet. They didn't call, didn't show up. No threats, no letters, not even a drive-by. My lawyer said that was a good sign, but I knew better. They were planning something. My parents didn't go down without dragging someone through the mud, usually me. I kept packing the house, slowly turning it back into a home. One afternoon, I found a photo album wedged behind a cabinet in the hallway closet. It was one of the old ones, before Jenna started getting all the attention, before everything got cold. There were pictures of me with birthday hats, gap-toothed smiles, and cake on my face. My mom actually looked like she was laughing in one of them. Not posing, laughing. I almost put the album in the trash, but I didn't. Later that week, Lily and I were at the house. I was scrubbing down the baseboards in what would soon be her room when she called me from the kitchen. She said someone was knocking. I came around the corner and stopped cold. It wasn't my parents. It wasn't Jenna. It was my uncle, my dad's brother. Uncle Mike had always been the outlier. He lived 3 hours away, showed up at weddings and funerals, and never really took sides. I hadn't seen him in 5 years. He looked uncomfortable, like he didn't want to be standing there but had made himself do it anyway. He said he was in town for work, that he'd heard some things, that maybe I could help clear them up. I let him in. Lily went back to coloring on the floor. He sat down and pulled out a folded piece of paper. It was a printed email from my dad. I didn't even need to read it to know what it said. According to my father, I'd forged documents, manipulated Grandma when she was no longer mentally capable, exploited her while she was sick and confused. That I tricked a dying woman into giving me her house. It was disgusting. But here's the part I didn't see coming. Uncle Mike didn't believe him. He said the letter made no sense. Grandma had always been sharp, sharper than both of them. Honestly, she'd once caught Uncle Mike trying to sneak a cheap TV into her assisted living unit and made him return it because it sounded too hollow. That's the kind of mind she had. Deliberate, stubborn. Then he said this, "You know they're planning to take you to court, right?" I did. My lawyer had warned me, but hearing it from someone in the family made it real. Uncle Mike shook his head and muttered something about them digging their own grave. Then he told me something else. Apparently, my parents had been lying about ownership for years, not just to neighbors and friends, but to the bank. They'd taken out a line of credit on the house years ago, claiming it was theirs. And now, with the eviction in motion, the bank was asking questions they couldn't answer. That part wasn't in the email. Uncle Mike heard it from a cousin who worked in lending. They'd committed fraud, and now they were caught between losing the house or losing everything else. I thanked him, not sure what else to say. He looked like he wanted to do more, but didn't know how. Before he left, he knelt down next to Lily and handed her a little wooden elephant from his travels. She beamed. He stood up and said, "That's how you treat family." I locked the door behind him. For the first time, I felt something I hadn't let myself feel in months. I was winning. But I also knew this wasn't over, not by a long shot. They were backed into a corner now, and people like my parents, they only get nastier when they have nothing left to lose. The lawsuit came on a Friday. Certified letter, hand-delivered to my door while I was making pancakes. Lily was sitting on the floor in her pajamas, building a tower out of markers. I opened the envelope while the pan was still hot, and for a second I just stood there staring at the ridiculous list of accusations: fraud, coercion, elder abuse. They were suing me over a house I legally owned. I called my lawyer. He wasn't surprised. He told me they'd try to drown me in paperwork, delay the eviction, make it look like I was the villain. My parents weren't trying to win. They were trying to exhaust me. Drag it out. Stall. Hope I'd cave or settle. But I wasn't backing down. The next week, I drove by the house to meet with the locksmith and change the code on the garage. That's when I saw the sign. A big white sign staked in the yard. For sale by owner. A phone number scrawled in black marker. They were trying to sell my house. I nearly laughed. The desperation was so blatant, it was pathetic. I called the number on the sign. Jenna answered. She sounded smug, like she'd been waiting for this moment. She said they already had an interested buyer, that it was funny how quickly things move when you deal with adults. I told her she might want to let the potential buyer know they'd be purchasing stolen property. She hung up. I called the county office that afternoon and reported it. Then my lawyer filed a cease and desist. The sign came down the next day, but the damage was done. I had neighbors calling, asking what was going on, why there were rumors the house was being sold out from under me. That weekend, I got the first anonymous message. It wasn't from a stranger. It was my mom's handwriting, folded into my mailbox with no envelope. It said, "You're sick. You're ruining your daughter. We pray for you daily." I shredded it. Didn't even let Lily see it, but I kept the pieces, just in case. Then came the most unexpected part. People started taking my side. Aunt Nancy, my mom's own sister, called me and said she wanted me to know the truth, that Grandma did talk about the will before she died, that she made her decision because she didn't trust my parents not to screw it up, that Jenna wasn't even considered. She said, "You had the most to lose," Nancy told me, "and the most heart." Then my cousin Denise called to say she'd help if I needed a place to store stuff or needed someone to sit with Lily during court dates. She said she couldn't believe the way they were treating us, that everyone always thought Jenna was the golden child. But it turns out gold flakes off real fast when people look too close. The silence I'd lived in for years was cracking. And behind it, there were people who'd always known something was wrong. They just never thought I'd fight back. But there was still one person who hadn't said anything. My grandmother's best friend, Lorraine. The one who'd taken care of her in the last few months. The one who knew everything. I decided to visit her. She opened the door, wearing one of Grandma's old cardigans, and hugged me before I could say a word. She already knew why I was there. She said Grandma had been very clear. The house was for me because I needed stability, because I was kind, because I had the backbone my parents lacked. Then she handed me something I didn't know existed, a sealed envelope, in my grandmother's handwriting dated 2 weeks before she passed. Inside was a letter, and what was written in it changed everything. It took me 10 minutes to open it. I sat in my car with the envelope in my lap, staring at my grandmother's handwriting like it might dissolve if I touched it too hard. The date was clear, 2 weeks before she died, while she was still lucid, still bossing nurses around and arguing about what brand of crackers they gave her. When I finally peeled it open, the smell hit me first, that old paper smell. Then I unfolded the letter and saw my name written just like she used to write it, Jamaica Lee. No one had called me that since I was a kid. The letter wasn't long, but every word hit like a brick to the chest. She said she knew what my parents were like, that she'd spent years watching them chip away at me, and that it broke her heart. She wrote that Jenna had always been a mirror of my mother, cold, performative, calculated, that they only understood love when it made them look good. She said she left me the house not because I needed it more, but because I would use it right. "You'll make it warm again," she wrote. "You'll fill it with laughter. You'll fix what they broke. And then at the bottom, something I hadn't expected at all, a short line. If they can test this, give Lorraine the key. That was it. No explanation. I called Lorraine right there in the car. She laughed when I asked, said she was wondering when I'd find it. Then she told me to come by the next morning. She had something for me. I barely slept that night. Lily curled up next to me after a nightmare, and I just let her stay. I watched her breathe for hours, wondering what kind of world I was dragging her into. But I also knew I was doing this for her, so she'd never have to sit on the edge of her bed wondering why her family didn't want her to shine. The next morning, Lorraine handed me a small wooden box. It was heavier than I expected. Inside were 3 things: a USB drive, a handwritten list of names, and a folded document, notarized and dated, a second addendum to my grandmother's will. Lorraine said Grandma had been planning for this. She guessed they'd try to fight it, try to twist it, ruin it. So she gave Lorraine copies of everything. Not just the will, not just her final wishes, but recordings, dozens of them. The USB drive had audio files. My grandmother, alone, talking through every reason for every choice she made. Calm, detailed, clear. She spoke about my parents' manipulations, about Jenna's obsession with appearances, about overhearing my father joke that Jamaica can't even keep a man. How's she going to keep a house? She had receipts, names, dates, even stories from people I'd never met. Apparently, she'd asked friends to write statements in case it went to court. The list of names, people ready to testify, neighbors, caregivers, even a former nurse. The addendum contained a clear clause. If the house was ever contested in court, a full secondary clause would go into effect. In that clause, my parents and Jenna would be permanently disinherited from anything tied to her estate, including remaining trust funds, including life insurance payouts, including the land in Arizona they'd always planned to retire on. I sent everything to my lawyer. 3 days later, he called me and said, "They just lost everything. By the end of the month, my parents were out of the house. Jenna tried to post some vague story on Facebook about betrayal and family snakes. It got 5 likes, all from people I hadn't spoken to since high school. They moved into a 2-bedroom apartment across town. I heard Jenna had to take on a second job to help with rent. And me? I moved into the house with Lily. We painted the walls lavender and sunshine yellow. We planted tomatoes in the backyard. We hung a swing from the old oak tree. They never apologized. Not to me, not to Lily, not even once. But I didn't need it. They thought I'd ruin the family, that I'd bring shame. What they couldn't understand was this: there was no family to ruin. They'd burned it years ago. The first few months were strange, almost peaceful. Lily would dance barefoot through the living room while I cooked dinner. The house felt alive again. For the first time in decades, laughter echoed in the hallways instead of shouting. Sometimes, when I passed the old photo frame still hanging on the wall, I caught glimpses of the girl I used to be, the one who thought love was something you had to earn. But not anymore. I wasn't that girl, and Lily would never have to be. One Saturday morning, I was out back pruning the rose bushes when a car I didn't recognize pulled up in front of the house. My stomach tightened. I wiped my hands on my jeans and went to the gate. A man stepped out. Mid-40s, suit, clipboard, process server. I'd seen enough legal envelopes to know what was coming. He handed it over politely, muttered something about court notice, and drove away before I could ask a question. Inside was a summons. Jenna was filing for emotional damages. She claimed I'd caused her reputational harm. I almost laughed out loud. My lawyer did. He said it was a desperate attempt to save face, that it would never hold up. Still, seeing her name on another court document made my chest tighten. It wasn't fear, it was exhaustion. But I showed up. I brought every document, every recording, every statement Lorraine had given me. Jenna didn't even make it through the first hearing. When the judge played the audio clip of Grandma explaining exactly why Jenna wasn't in the will, Jenna stood up and walked out. My lawyer said it was the fastest dismissal he'd ever seen. After that, the noise stopped for good. The calls, the texts, the letters, all gone. I heard, through Aunt Nancy, that my parents had stopped talking to most of the family. Apparently, they couldn't handle the embarrassment. I didn't celebrate. I just breathed. Lily started 3rd grade that fall. She made new friends, invited them over for sleepovers, and filled the house with drawings, glitter, and giggles. On her 8th birthday, she asked if Grandma could come. I froze for a second, then realized she meant my grandmother, the one who'd left us the house. I smiled and said, "She's here, baby. She's always here." We baked a cake together that night. I let her decorate it however she wanted. It was messy and perfect and covered in way too many sprinkles. When she blew out the candles, I found myself whispering thank you under my breath. Not to my parents, not even to Grandma, but to the version of myself that finally stopped waiting for their love. Because that version of me, the one who said enough, saved us both. Months later, as autumn crept in, I found myself sitting on the porch swing one evening after Lily went to bed. The air was cool, the crickets loud, the stars just starting to appear. I thought about Grandma's letter, about Lorraine, about every person who'd stood up when I finally did. I thought about the silence that used to suffocate me and how now it felt like peace. The house creaked softly behind me. I looked at the front door, freshly painted yellow, and smiled. For the first time in my life, it really was mine.